You know, it could be said that our national pastime is political boxing. We just love to fight over the best way to run the country. Liberals, conservatives, right, left, red, blue. We're fighting all the time, and nobody's ever going to win. But what we never fight about is the process itself. I've never heard anybody suggest a better idea for a system of government than government for the people, by the people. And yet, I think democracy is in real trouble now because of globalization. And I want to tell you why, and I want to also offer a solution. Let me start with a story. You remember a few weeks ago the fiscal cliff debate, when we were all teetering on the edge of certain doom, when right at the last minute, Congress comes sweeping in on their white horse and rescues us from falling over the edge into certain financial ruin. Well, we discovered the very next day that actually there is one company that got a $500 million windfall in that bill. It's a company called Amgen. It's the biggest biotech firm in the world. And they had also recently been in the news because they just pled guilty to fraud and were leveled with the biggest fine in history for this kind of marketing violation. So do you see what's happening? You and I, the taxpayer, are paying their fine. Now, how does that happen in a democracy? Well, as you might imagine, there were 3 senators on the finalization committee, and all of them had received large campaign contributions from Amgen. Obviously, this is a case of corruption. What we need to do is take these bastards and take them out of office and replace them with good people, right? However, it's not that simple, because one of those bastards is our very own Max Baucus, who is not only a good person, he is a friend of mine. So the first threat to democracy is that even good people can be bribed. I'm going to talk about a couple of others. Second is, corporations, and especially multinational corporations, are becoming so huge, they are overtaking the size of nations themselves, and there's nothing to stop their growth. So for instance, Walmart is now bigger and more powerful than Norway and 157 other nations around the world. Now, it used to be the corporation was responsible to a certain community, or at the very least was confined by the laws of the nation in which it was born. And neither of those are true anymore. So the second threat to democracy is a rise of large coercive powers. And that's related to the third threat, which is that in an age of globalization, the boundaries of the nations themselves are dissolving. No matter how hard we work to try to keep things like toxins out of our medical supplies, all a company has to do is move overseas to another country that doesn't have such laws. They can produce those materials and they still work their way into our system. So how, in this situation, can democracy survive at a time when leaders can be bribed, when coercive powers grow larger and larger, and where nations can no longer protect their own citizens in what's rapidly becoming a post-state world? Well, I'm just a skinny little artist from Montana, but I've got one thing that these big powers don't have, and that is the capacity to come up with new, beautiful, creative ideas. So for the last couple of years, I've been working on a model for a new kind of democracy, for a globalized world, that is immune to all these problems, and it's based on 3 items of good news. The first is the shape of the internet. Now, I'm a sculptor, so I'm sensitive to shape. The internet is one person, one connection, one voice. All the voices are connected together, and everything is absolutely flat. The great thing about that is officials cannot be bribed because nobody sticks up above the web. The second item I'm going to illustrate with another item of bad news, which is, I'm sure you remember this, there was a protest in Iran a few years ago. And the government responded the easy way, with violence. Well, there's a young girl in that protest, a 16-year-old girl named Neda Soldan, who was shot by a government sniper. What the government didn't realize is the world had already changed by then. Because standing next to her was a young man with a cell phone, and he filmed as she lay dying on the sidewalk. Put the film on the internet, it went all around the world, and is now the most witnessed death in history. Now that has got to send shivers up the spine of every despot around the world. So the second item of good news is that no matter how big the coercive powers get, one person who has the truth can counter that kind of power. That's new to history. And the reason for that is because of the third item of good news, which is, no matter what system you grow up in, what laws you are subject to, everybody around the world knows that a government shooting a 16-year-old girl is wrong. We don't have to have laws to uphold those kinds of values, because every one of us carries within our heart an inherent sense of what is right and wrong. So even in a situation where a government can no longer protect its citizens, citizens themselves working together can defend each other because of the laws they carry in their hearts. So the project I've been working on is called Democratic Globe, and I would encourage you to look it up online, democraticglobe.com. And I would invite you to try to poke holes in my theory. I'm not so sure that my theory is going to be the future of democracy. But if democracy is going to survive in the 21st century, it's going to have those immunities to those powers. One thing we know for sure is people with power are never going to let it trickle down to the little folks like you and me. If we are going to have democracy for the people, by the people, we're going to have to design it and implement it ourselves. And I ask for your help.